is an extraordinary meeting of the council. Every meeting in a sense is extraordinary, but it just makes us want to plan. We convened especially to exchange views on draft budget for next year. First of all, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we do. So we've got apologies from Councillor Rolfe, Councillor Page, Councillor Partington from Thanet District Council, Councillor Banbridge from Thanet District Council, and Councillor Dawson from Kent County Council.
Thank you. Is anybody filming the event? Yes. Can I take this opportunity to say there was a complaint about a committee meeting of last time when the recording didn't last for the full meeting. I apologise for that. I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't happen again. We have been experimenting, and I think we're actually improving the filming of meetings. I think it's an important exercise that we can make them available. Are there any declarations of interest on money? I see no hands raised. Thank you. We have the minutes of the last council meeting, which was held on the 6th of November, to approve. They were circulated a few days ago. If you had the chance to read them, can I ask that someone propose that we accept them? Thank you, Councillor Cornford. Second. In favour? Thank you. Public right to speak. Do we have a
Imagine.
So we move on to the budget discussion. The meeting is held really partly because I think we should, as far as possible, have an open procedure for the budget, and partly because I think those members who are not on the Finance and General Purposes Committee want to be more fully involved in the financial management of the Council. Just to explain briefly the procedure, a meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee was held last week. It looked at a draft of the budget which had been circulated to all members prior to that meeting. During that meeting, several comments were made. A revised version of the budget has been distributed. It was not subject to a vote in Finance and General Purposes, but I'm grateful to Councillor O'Connor, who's produced the revised version, and given us comments in the margin, which come on comments that were made. I don't know if I should maybe just mention some of the key ones. The first was not to include grants and donations which we hope to receive from other sources. It is a fine judgment which we actually discussed between the two of us before the last draft. Basically, if there is uncertainty about whether a grant or donation might be available, it is probably more prudent not to include it, even if we know that a grant or donation is quite likely for certain events. The second point is perhaps on the events and tourism budget, where certain increases were proposed, which give rise to a very significant, more than doubling of the allocation for events and tourism over the budget in the current year. And the third issue, which I thought we should perhaps flag, was the the discussion on the reserves and in particular the auditor's comment that we should provide for a reserve of about 50% of the precept, and we are not at that level yet. I should add that there is another document kicking around, which is a document what I wrote. It is intended just to be a general background document on the budget. It doesn't have any status other than I put it down because I thought it might be helpful, particularly for councillors who were a variety of recently, but also for members of the public, to understand a bit about the background and where we're coming from in terms of budgetary management. It was written a little while ago, so there may be one or two points of drafting that need looking at. But basically, it's intended to say what are our objectives, how do we use the budget to achieve those objectives, and how do we structure the budget to comply with what we need to do. So I hope that brings everybody more or less up to speed. I don't know if Councillor O'Connor wants to add anything. She's worked very hard on this, I should say, to try and give us a document that we can debate tonight.
Just to say thank you. Just to say that this was actually broken down into, you can call it departments if you like, to make it easier to look back on costs to see what we can do for our things. So we basically split the office costs, operatives costs, events and tourism costs. So we put them into groups, looked at them individually, and matched them against any known costs that have already occurred and we think are ongoing. And that's how we came to the first draft of the budget.
Perhaps if we look first at expenditure and go back to look at income, that's the easiest way of doing it. Councillor Crawford, can I invite you to briefly outline the HR budget figure which is included?
Yes, sorry. As
Sorry, I should say I didn't warn her. So.
The HR budget is the largest budget of the council because obviously it involves the operative town clerk and responsible financial officer, and also the employees who are currently part-time. We have 3 of them. The office work is vital to the work of the town council. It holds everything together, and as residents will have seen since January 2018, we have achieved a considerable amount. This year, the budget is as it should be. We're not uplifting it to any great extent. Our town clerk has had her appraisal and it's been outstanding. We've done really, really well this year. So thank you to Jill. And her salary will go up 1.5 points for January. This was in Pauline's original budget, and I'd like to say thank you to Pauline for cracking that nut and having each committee contribute to the budget in time for December. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It's perhaps worth adding in that I noticed that of all the town and parish councils in the UK, 80% of them have less than 2,500 inhabitants. So in the grand scheme of things, on a countrywide basis, we are covering quite a large town. I think I was quite surprised by that, and it sort of helps to put things in perspective. The other committee asked to chip in because finance and general purposes has a sort of dual role. It manages some of the lines itself, and others it manages the budget overall. was events and tourism. I don't know if someone would like to make any comments, either Councillor Nightingale or Councillor O'Connor.
As I was at the Finance and General Purpose, do you want me to look through that? The events and tourism budget, we haven't had increased it slightly from the following year from 5,000 to 7,500. However, it was felt that with all the things that we're hoping to get through for this year, that a couple of the councillors felt that it wasn't quite enough and they wanted to actually increase that to take it up to 11,000. And where they wanted to increase it was they felt that Westgate Road costs a lot more, and Westgate in Bloom would cost more than what we first allocated. This is really up for discussion because none of these events does allow for any grants or input from any businesses or members of the public. So it's almost as if the council will be funding most of these things themselves and not getting anything in. And that could possibly happen. We can't guarantee on getting anything else. But it was quite a bit of uplift of 3,500 for that area. So I think that's the biggest one that needs to be open for discussion here at this moment.
Okay, Councillor Scott and Councillor Crawford.
Yeah, I'll possibly start getting the ball rolling. I mean, I've only had a few meetings and had an opportunity to sit on the Westgate Day. But having spoke to our town park and getting some information and some feedback, it seems to be Punch and Judy might be something we can sort of drop altogether. I mean, I would say I was a bit of a traditionalist, but in the same breath, apparently the last outcome of the Punch and Judy, the actual face painting turned out to be more of an event than the actual Punch and Judy in itself. And I think just the bare minimum of the residents are sort of benefiting from it, and the kids, you know, they don't see the need for the Punch and Judy. And I just feel that we could probably better set that off. I mean, during around about the time the Punch and Judy is normally hosted, the weather does tend to be quite tricky to sort of work with. Apparently the weather on that particular last couple of days were quite stormy and windy, with only sort of sunny spells, and I just think maybe we should be able to take that particular amount of money set aside for Punch and Judy and then put it into the Westgate Day, because I do personally feel that the Westgate Day will be very reliant on funding from outsourcing, but I mean, that's not guaranteed, that isn't set, and really it's sort of a catch-22. I mean, for this day to be sort of considered very memorable and for it to start becoming an annual thing, it really needs to be sort of accepted both by the residents but also seen as a big thing for businesses and sponsors to actually start thinking, okay, this is something worth investing, so they don't do it for this particular year, but we've managed to show them that this is what it's going to be. It's going to be an annual thing. Then hopefully next year we'll be able to say, right, we know what's expected, we know what's worked, we now know where people are prepared to actually put the money where the mouth is. So I think that is sort of my take on that particular part, and hopefully.
Yes, thank you. I don't know that we're in a position tonight to go through the budget line by line, and certainly I don't want to prejudge what the committees themselves might want to say on specific issues. I think it's more for us to look at the overall balance of the budget, because they have had the chance to discuss this. But Councillor Nightingale, I don't know if you have any.
Well, as I was saying, we had a long discussion about that, and we were talking about the budget for events and tourism, and actually, I think it was probably pretty general that we probably wouldn't want Punch and Judy, and but in fact the biggest expenditure was on the face painting, and probably that was the most sort of used part and enjoyment of it, I suppose. And I was already thinking that no doubt there are people who would be quite willing to do face painting, you know, local community people. So, and this sort of increase in the budget was not something that really, and not to less percentages that we anticipated anyway, really. So I think what Councillor O'Connor's saying, that this is right, that this is one area where I do think we need to, be wise and spend whatever we have appropriately. I mean, £5,000 has been, and it's never been increased since we started the tourism. So I think we've done well to manage what we've achieved on that. But, I'd be, as Councillor Scott was saying, I think, we do anticipate that some of the things which we have funded before, like Punch and Judy and other things as well, would be diminished in preference to being linked in with the Westgate Day. So I think Councillor O'Connor's right, this is one area where I think we should look at what exists really.
Thank you. I should perhaps point out that although we decided not to include expected donations in the budget, it has been the case. For instance, Punch and Judy, and also the clerk was showing me the figures for the Beacon event held recently. The grants that we've had, particularly from KCT in both cases, but also for the Beacon event, we were able to work with Heritage Centre, who had money available. A lot of these events are only possible if we get grant funding from outside, and I think if we didn't have that funding, we put a serious question mark over whether it was viable for us just as a council. Councillor Cornford.
Am I right, the budget for 2019-20 is 7,500 for events and tourism?
Well, there isn't a budget as yet. The initial budget proposed by the Events and Tourism Committee, which went to Finance and General Purposes, was 7,500, which was already an increase on on the current year's budget of £5,000, but it should be added that we hit the ceiling and left a bump on the head. So there is an indication, I think, that events and tourism was probably underfunded this current year. So 7,500 was the budget proposed by Events and Tourism, and it was Finance and General Purposes that increased this to 11 in the draft that you had seen. But as I explained at the beginning, there wasn't a vote on that, it was a suggestion of certain councillors.
7,500 is for the whole of the events and tourism, and it doesn't. I remember Councillor O'Connor saying at the FGP that although 5,000 is attached to the Punch and Judy, she had to explain to the Chairman of Finance that it didn't necessarily relate to Punch and Judy. What I'm saying is that that budget can be mixed and matched wherever we need it, and we don't seem to have anything to justify increasing it to 11,000. The Westgate Day is meant to be small, growing larger, involving the community, attracting funding, which I know Councillor McLeod has put forward to us. And I don't see why we would need to increase it by £4,000, especially as the Westgate Day has only just recently really come to the fore. I mean, it was on the table when we were in our previous home over the road meeting, and since we've been here, it's only just in the last couple of months that we've really focused on the Westgate Day.
Well, I think the idea was still being formulated until a few months ago, and I do think because not only Councillor Page, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, but also a whole variety of community groups are involved in it, that it is quite, I mean, it will be in some way my flagship event, but having an idea at this stage of how much will actually be needed is true, is difficult to know because we haven't done it before. Councillor Hannah Scott.
So I was just thinking if we weren't going to be doing Punch and Judy, which I think is a really reasonable idea, seeing as the clerk would have 2 events to run during the summer, which I think maybe just pushing it a little bit too far. That's 1,500. If I know that we're not kind of allocating line by line, but if the 1,000 then added to the Westgate Day budget of 2,000 equal 3,000, and the 500 was taken off and added to the Westgate in blue to go from 1,000 to 1,500, 3,000 for the Westgate Day and 1,500 for the Westgate in blue by taking Punch and Judy up would be, sorry, do you follow what? So by taking off 1,500 from the Punch and Judy, you split that 1,000 to the Westgate Day and 500 to the Westgate in blue. That would mean that the Westgate Day project would have 3,000 and the Westgate in blue would have 1,500, and therefore we wouldn't need the 3,500 increase. It would just be 7,500, but
Yes,
a
thank you.
rearrangement of the money.
As I was saying, I don't want to go through line by line and try and do the work that the Events and Tourism Committee is supposed to do. What I really need this evening is a view on the overall allocations, and if we have a slightly clearer view on that, as to how we raise the money, because obviously every increase has an effect in terms of the income that's required, and given that we don't expect to have a government support grant anymore, virtually all our income will be coming from the precept. I should add that it has been raised several times in finance and general purposes that we need to develop our own income streams, which will help us to finance activities apart from what we're raised through the precept. The difficulty for this coming year, I think, is that while we have several ideas, not many of them are actually starting to generate income at this point. Councillor O'Connor.
Can I just, so the first draft of the budget made the precept increase of 1.93%. With the, if we took all the adjustments of what was recommended in the finance and general purpose, or put forward from the finance and general purpose, it would be 5.56. If we go somewhere in between that, we don't take it. In other words, if we don't uplift the events and tourism for that we needed to do for the grant, and amended what we needed to do for the capital reserve, it would actually be 3.15%. So that's the type of monies that looks at for you. So just to give you an idea of the overall uplift that would make.
Councillor Scott, did you want to come back? Councillor?
Oh yeah, it was. I didn't want to tell the tourism committee what to do. I was just explaining my rationale as to why I thought actually 7,500 might be still suitable by taking off the 1,500 for the Punch and Judy and adding it on in 2 separate increments to the Westgate Day and Westgate in blue. It was just my rationale behind it. And I'm hoping that £3,000 for the Westgate Day would be perhaps enough to start off with, enough money to play with.
I think that's very reasonable. As I say, the increase that was proposed on the second budget was considerably more than we as a group had said in the first place. And just the other point was, I think Councillor Pennington is right that we would have just about hit the top of our budget for 5,000. That is not taking into account the fact that one of the biggest expenditures we had, i.e. buying the beacon, was in the previous year's budget. So that was quite a percentage of the total amount. The 5,000 was to purchase it. Okay, we use it long term because that's what it's designed for. But yeah, I would think that's, well, I can only speak for myself, not the whole thing, but I would think that's fairly reasonable, so.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Nightingale as well. I mean, I do feel that there does need to be an increase to just target some of, well, the ambition that we want for Westgate. I mean, basically, we want to get Westgate on the map and show it to be the town that it's meant to be. It's got great beaches, it has great heritage, and I mean, I think we can all agree on that. I mean, certainly for the proposed uplift, again, it wasn't something that was discussed, it was the financial and general purposes. I mean, when we got together, we thought realistically, and not to go line by line, the Punch and Judy was the one that was sort of under contention as to think, right, is this something? We placed it in the budget purely just to make the numbers at the time, but yeah, I mean, just basically echoing what Councillor Nightingale said is,
Yeah.
That's okay. I've just taken kind of £2,000 off of the events and tourism, so rather going up 3,500, going up 1,100, because the money for the Punch and Judy would drop down into those lines, and it would make a 4.2% increase. So if we're looking at how much we want to put the precept up, every time we take something off or take it down, that's how it changes the precept. So I think what we need to discuss here is what's the line of precept that we're looking at increasing. The rest of the budget seems to be fine, because it covers costs. There is no wriggle room. We've gone through very, very carefully of actual costs and projected costs of what we think it is with the knowledge that we've got at this moment. And obviously that's the only flexible area that we seem to have, because it is a piece of string for events and tourism. We don't know exactly.
Yeah.
So
Could I just ask you to clarify partly from my understanding? As I understand it, we were advised by the auditor that we should increase the level of reserve to 50% of the precept,
that's what
which on the current year's precept would be something of the order of 60,000 to 70,000. Presumably, we wouldn't aim to do all this in 1 year. And can you explain a bit of the background, what we need to do in relation to that?
We've obviously got planning and reserves, which has always been reported on. This year, with the surplus that we had last year, which was only 6,400, but with that surplus we had there, what we've done is we've split the reserves into certain areas, and those areas are trying to get up the contingency for the precept, which is what we've been advised to have. Capital projects, we're trying to build on capital projects, and what we term as prudency accruals, so we put money aside for things that were likely to happen. Of that, estimated for 2019-20, we would have 50,000 towards our precept, so we're getting there by building it year by year. We do a contingency that we hope that we don't have to spend, and if we don't spend that contingency in the budget, that goes to the lower precept. We have got prudency accruals, and of that we've got local plan support, elections and discretionary powers. So we have that going in there, and that is 27,000. The rest of it is what we've got for capital projects. And at the moment, we have just about 16,000 towards any capital projects that we want. So that's for instance, I don't know that, you know, if we needed towards a military shelter or something, anything with capital that is required, and we may need to do it at the moment. So we're building on that. We're a very young council, and that can only be built on gradually. That was the
Okay.
financial bill. So that's how the reserves are made up. So that is not the precept we're asking for. The precept, this is what we've already got, this is what we're doing on each year.
Okay. Can I the floor to specific comments on the precept issue, then yes, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, it was just, I mean, my proposal for the tourism committee would be to just keep it at the 7,500. So it was just the 7,500, not an uplift. And I think that's what you agreed to, or you were saying that may be sensible to do.
When we had the discussion, that was the figure we came to, and it was increased, obviously, or the potential for the increase was made subject to the Finance Costs Committee. So that's how it was designed. So,
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, can I just follow up on Councillor Scott's point? I agree with the point that she makes about retaining the original £7,500. I think we've already seen evidence from the Beacon event where, with putting a lot of effort and time in, you can produce an event for a large amount of people for £500. And I do think as a council it's our responsibility to look at alternative sources of income, sponsorship and funding. So I do think it's really important that we are over-egging the pudding by trying to take too much money for people that don't have money and putting a bit more effort into achieving cost-effective events and programmes for the council. So I agree with Hannah Scott that we should retain 7,500.
Okay. I would point out that the total cost of the Beacon event is, if I understand correctly, 1,300, and it's because we had £800 of outside funding coming from KCC, but also from the Heritage Centre that we kept the cost down. Obviously, this would apply, if this funding is available again for future events, and I know that a request has already gone out to KCC and TDC to see what they might be able to contribute to Westgate Day. That money will obviously offset what we need to allow for, or what we need to pay at the end of the day. But we still need to allow for the maximum funding that we think we can do. Yes, Councillor Crawford.
I was just going to add also that we're not supposed to put on events, we're supposed to support them, and therefore we should find the funding, which is available, it is out there, and again, involve communities and the community and businesses within the community, because that's self-promotion.
Okay. Well, there seemed broad agreement to go back to the 7,500 ceiling, which the Events and Tourism Committee had proposed, and I understand from Councillor O'Connor that we are in the clear in relation to the auditor's comments on the reserve. Do you wish to go back to this issue of the precept?
No, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the 2 points, 2 points were raised were valid points, and we couldn't have been backwards. So that would make a 3.15 increase because of the overall budget, which is actual costs that it's costing us and things. And I think that's a reasonable without pushing everything through.
Yes, Councillor Scott.
So the other uplift was line 9,000 capital projects. So an uplift of £1,000 in capital projects.
Yeah.
Councillor King felt this needed to be uplifted each year to build on capital projects. I was just wondering what capital projects do we have already and what was perhaps proposed for that £1,000, if anybody knows?
It's not for a particular capital project, it's to start building. At the moment we've got nothing. If we wanted to buy any of our assets back, if they're up for, but we haven't got any money to do that. It's to start building the things that we can start for Westgate to get back, i.e. the pavilions and things like that that might start coming in, or there's there's things like the one that's recently had, which was all the new bins that we provided. So it can either be smaller or start saving up to large ones. We have very little put aside for anything capital that we need.
Yes, I think there are two main categories. One is that if we were applying for something like Heritage Lottery Fund grants, we would need to provide some money from our own funds, because they usually look for a local contribution. So we would need to find several thousand in that framework. Even if we were getting 100,000 from Heritage Lottery Fund, they would be looking to us to fund 5 or 10%. The other area is where we would be looking for revenue-raising investments in the future. So which might need us to invest in something. I don't want to be too specific. There are ideas around, but most of the revenue-raising ideas would require some initial investment, and that normally would come from reserves, not from current income. Anything else, or shall I? I think what we need to do tonight is maybe just see how comfortable we are with the budget as it stands then, with that one major amendment, or whether you want some more time to think about things. Councillor Cornford.
The agenda item 5, budget discussion, says decision required. How are you translating that?
Well, we need to decide either we can decide to agree the budget as it stands. As I say, Finance and General Purposes didn't actually take a decision on the budget. It only submitted the budget with some suggestions to full council. But we could adopt the budget as it stands. We could defer a final decision on the budget until the subsequent meeting, because I think we have until, at a pinch, the beginning of January, before we have to notify to TDC the level of precept that we, the level of income that we would require from the precept. Those are the two main choices, I think, beforehand. So we can decide not to decide if you want. And as I just said, I mean, it depends partly if you want a bit more time to think about this, or whether you feel happy to go ahead at this level. I feel Councillor King, as Chair of Finance and General Purposes, has had his comments reflected in Councillor O'Connor's document, but obviously he's not here to defend them. Councillor O'Connor.
I'd like to know if councillors would like to vote on this, because a lot of work's gone into it. There's a lot of preparation from Councillor O'Connor and Town Clerk, and as well Councillor Bennington. Personally, I'd like to propose that we take this forward and vote on it, and then especially as next meeting we're not going to have our own class with us. And we'll be ready to go in January. We'll hit the ground running in January. No?
Yeah, I think kind of, there seems to be kind of a general consensus around the table that if we put the precept that we've just amended it to, taking off, going back to the original events and tourism budget of 7,500, we obviously, it sounds like a very good idea to have that £1,000 capital project. We have to take on the £700. Those two things seem to be very sensible suggestions. And we'll go back to the 7,500, and then Councillor O'Connor's worked it out of a precept rise of...
It's actually 4,300, which is 3.15%.
So the increase of how much, sorry?
4,300 budget reading from last year. It will be with those new figures.
So it's 2,600 plus 1,700. And I think we brought it down to a sensible precept, which is kind of take into account the sensible comments, and then we've discussed today the tourism project. So I think there may be a movement to go for that for the vote tonight for a 3.15% increase in precept.
So, was that a proposal? Everybody's nodding.
It was seconded.
Yeah, okay. I propose that we go back to the original events and tourism budget of 7,500, but we keep the 1,000 capital projects, and obviously we can't take into account the £700 grants and donation. So therefore, I propose the increase in precept of 3.15% that Councillor O'Connor has calculated with those amendments.
Okay. Second. All in favour?
That wasn't too hard, was it?
That was good.
Well done, darlings.
That was amazing, wasn't it?
I'll send you the updated version. Thank you.
You're a shock.
I'm relieved.
So, Councillor O'Connor will produce budget as amended by tonight's meeting, and the clerk will have time to pass that to TDC to show that the council will stand on the brink and do things at a faster. I have Chairman's report on the agenda for tonight. I will probably give a fuller report next week, but I wanted just to underline the arrangements. As you know, the clerk is going on leave, a long way away on leave. Before I retired, I used to either travel to a different time zone or travel up a mountain, because I avoided the temptation to be constantly ringing the office and finding out what was going on. So I'm quite happy for her sake, though not for mine, that she is going a long way away. But she will be away from, well, the beginning of next week, more or less, until the new year. So my first duty is to wish her a very happy leave and a happy Christmas. The second thing is to inform you that we have asked Roy Wade, who has been our local clerk in the past, to stand in and be available, so he will be clerking the two meetings which are planned for December, namely full council next week and the finance and general purposes on the 18th. Thirdly, to say that the office will be closed to the public during the clerk's leave. The public, if anybody needs to contact us, Jasmine, the assistant clerk, will be following the emails and taking phone calls, but the office itself will not be open. And fourthly, if councillors wish to raise anything, because Jasmine will be very busy managing the operatives, running the office, could you address things directly to me, effectively? I will not be actually in Westgate for the whole of December, but I'm always on the end of my mobile phone or usually through email. So I'd appreciate it if you would come direct to me so that Jasmine can get on with her work. So I thank you very much for your attendance today. Thank you for a very common discussion. And I close the meeting at